A wild day for the Chicago Bears as we not only see a trade, but we now see a release here on this Thursday evening. Welcome on into the Bear Report podcast. I'm Steven Johnson. He is Zack Pearson. And Zack, we got some news that just dropped. Adam Schefter reporting the Bears releasing Pro Bowl linebacker Tremaine Edmunds. Probably the most obvious of moves, but just breaking here right before we decided to have a little shindig on the air.
Yeah, we planned to do this DJ Moore thing, and then boom, as we're getting ready to set up, they release Tremaine Edmunds, but that's not shocking at all. Like, they were trying to trade him, large contract, had to get out of it due to their cap situation, which we'll talk about a little bit more here. But yeah, after they couldn't find a trade partner, this was probably the most likely scenario, was that they were going to release him. Wasn't realistic to put him in a trade for Max Crosby. There was rumors of the New York Giants. That really wasn't super realistic, I'd say, in my eyes. But here we are. Tremaine Edmunds gone, DJ Moore gone, and the Bears finally have cap space now to work with.
That they do. Looking at their cap space situation between the trade of DJ Moore, Tremaine Edmunds being released, and obviously the surprising retirement of Drew Dolman earlier this week as well. It's now $44 million that have been let up for what the Bears have to play with, and that's probably not the end of the moves, especially considering that they were over the cap when all of this did begin. I believe right now they're sitting on about $34 million in the black. So not even touching any restructures. Obviously, it's making some, tears between the Bears fandom of whether or not the DJ Moore trade was the best move for this team. And I think that talking through that and kind of seeing both sides of it as well, that's something we'll obviously get to here. But, Tremaine Edmunds, for as big of a hit as he was, and the signing a couple years ago, for looking at this player since 2000 with 900 plus tackles and 50 plus passes defended before turning 28 years old, it is Luke Kuechly for the Carolina Panthers and Tremaine Edmunds. That's it. So from a statistical standpoint, he's a guy that is obviously doing a lot. We've talked about the shortcomings in the pass defense that Tremaine Edmunds has brought to the field, but still now the Bears officially needing 3 linebackers to start the season in 2026 because they're not going to have Noah Sewell and they're probably not going to have TJ Edwards as well.
Yeah, and this is a product of just bad contracts that just eventually catch up to you. And the 2 recent ones, Grady Jarrett played better at the end of last season, but you gave him a lot of money as a veteran. Dio, you gave a lot of money to and essentially got nothing from. A couple extensions, which were probably warranted, but yeah, you eventually have to pay this money. And if not, you have to make key decisions like this to let key players go. And with Tremaine, like you said, the pass coverage wasn't good. He was still playing at a Pro Bowl level until he got hurt. A couple interceptions. I believe he was leading the league in leading the Bears in tackles before he got hurt. So yeah, it's tough now because, like you said, you need 3 linebackers. I'm guessing DeMarco Jackson will probably be back in a cheap deal. They probably will draft one now that they got some extra draft compensation for DJ Moore pending a potential trade. But yeah, it's a lot of holes in this defense. But here's the other thing: the Bears are trying to get Dennis Allen his own players and players that fit the mold. A lot of these guys are essentially from Matty Rafus's defense. So yeah, it sucks to lose Tremaine Edmunds. But it was kind of writing was on the wall. I didn't think it was realistic. Why would any team trade anything for him when the Bears essentially, everyone knew the situation, right? Like pending trading someone like Jalen Johnson or Montez Sweat or a move like that, the Bears just weren't going to have, any moves to make to free up the cap space. Like, that was the obvious one. They weren't going to move on from DeAndre Swift, weren't probably going to move on from Cole Kmet. So yeah, Tremaine was the most likely of them. And they didn't have a suitor, and now this is what happens. So you have to let them go.
And I know a lot of people were kind of holding out hope and saying, okay, well, this is clearly an obvious move, and it is now in hindsight that the move has actually been announced now that for whatever reason, there were reports earlier in the week from ESPN saying that there was a market for Tremaine Edmunds, whether it was the Giants or the Raiders, and there were a couple other teams involved there. It's just like I still I don't get it. I
Yeah,
truly don't. It made no sense why teams would jump at that, and really looking at the free agent class overall and even this upcoming NFL draft class, there's some pretty solid players at the linebacker position that are going to be available. So this isn't something where it's like, oh no, what are we going to do? Kind of similar to the quarterback situation and what we talked about last week with Tyson Bagent. And there aren't a lot of options out there to try and plug and play on top of a weak draft class at the position. So I you got to take the cap space and go. I mean, that's
yeah.
ultimately what to like you said, Dio Dangbo is really the key piece as to why we saw one, maybe both of these moves today, which sucks. You're going to be able to probably move off of that contract next year. Um, if he doesn't rebound, which I think all things considered, I don't know how much you can really put in him being a major
Trust
part of
me.
your 26 team. It's tough. But that's kind of the allure of the NFL setup where moves are forced like this, and we're seeing it across the NFL. It's not just the Bears, even the Chiefs. Making big moves, and is that Trent McDuffie? Is that who they ended up trading to the Rams?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
all of picks, and so I mean, just having to shed that cap, and this is going to be the first of many years as long as Caleb continues to advance and he gets extended. I mean, this is going to be a common occurrence where you're just going to have to get used to the Bears having to send off one or two players in offseason just to make the space work.
That's why you have to hit on draft picks. Like when
Right.
you have top 10 picks, even first round picks overall, you have to hit on them. And I think it's safe to say they hit on Colson Loveland, which is a good start.
Yes.
But eventually, you're gonna have to pay a lot of these guys. And if you're not drafting well year after year, you're gonna run into a situation where you got to do this. And I think we're starting to see that with the Bears right now. And also, you have to be smart with these contracts. And I think, I hate to keep bringing up the Dio contract, but it just at the time I don't think many people liked it in general. You were banking on a guy who just never really put it together in Indianapolis, and then you were hoping that he would put it together in Chicago. Yeah, he fit Dennis Allen and what he wanted, but to me, it's a swing and a miss, and you're sitting here now having to move key pieces and finding ways to open up the cap. And like you said, this is going to continue to happen unless you draft well and unless you have smart contracts. Now, you know, the cap is a myth in a way, but at the same time, you move all this dead money, you're going to have to pay. Look what happens to the Saints, and look what happens to the
Yeah.
Chiefs. And, the Cowboys are restructuring deals, but eventually you're going to have to pay the contracts some point. We saw that with, Ryan Pace, where Ryan Poles had to move on from, Khalil Mack and a couple guys to essentially free up cap space to do what he needed to do to kind of level this thing out and then make their big splashes and moves. But um you know I guess now they've, what you said, like just over 33 or 30, whatever is 34 million to kind of play around with, um pending more moves. I don't think we'll see anything surprising. Like I don't think Tyson Bagent gets moved. I think that probably would have happened by now. um but yeah, it'll be interesting what the Bears going to do, because like you said, Drew Dalman suddenly retired. You have to find a center. You have to find a left tackle. You have to find a pass rusher. You have no safety signed. You have to find three linebackers. If you signed DeMarco Jackson, you have to find two. And, yeah, you have draft capital to do this, but it's hard to fix all that in one off season.
Yeah, I think if anything, just based on the additional holes that were created today, that It doesn't feel, and I think that the initial thought process for the DJ Moore trade was, oh, maybe the Bears are trying to set things up to trade for Max Crosby. I think, frankly, they're out of the running on it now. It just does not make sense at all for them to go after a player of that caliber and that contract, given all of these other holes, and then having to give up that draft capital. Yeah, maybe it sounds nice, for giving up a first round pick in 2 seconds if you can make that work, but at the same time, that would not do much of any good for all of the other gaps that are currently facing this defense and now offensive line, which I mean it sucks that instead of talking about filling all of these needs, we're talking about more needs that weren't even on the radar. And for the Bears, now they sit at pick 25, 57 and 60 in the second round, and then 89 in the third round. They don't pick again after the fourth round at 129 until the seventh round. So there are no fifth or sixth round picks for this Bears team right now as it stands. And I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I can't imagine that they're done, but I don't know what the other move would necessarily be. Because I don't feel good about the draft pick situation either. And it's bad saying that because they have 4 picks inside the top 90.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I don't think they're done with Max Crosby, but I think you're not gonna you can't I don't think you could get Tyler Linderbaum and a legit linebacker if you're gonna get Max Crosby. It kind of feels like it's either Max Crosby or a handful of players, right? If that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
they can go in on Max Crosby, but they're not going to have money to, get a linebacker of Tremaine Edmunds, caliber, or a safety opposite if they bring back Kevin Byard. So it kind of feels like for Ryan Poles, and also like, do you want, if it is 2 first round picks, do you want to give up 2 first round picks? You're in a tough spot there. Like, if you can maybe get it done where it's a first this year and like a third that could turn into a 2, I don't know, maybe, but like, you're also kind of having to punt away then the chance to get a Tyler Linderbaum and, more depth at safety and defensive back. So again, I don't think it's likely they get Max Crosby. I don't think they're out of it, but I don't think it's likely, just because of the holes that you kind of have to fill at this point now. But, the other side of that is if you go after Max Crosby and you get Max Crosby, you get a pretty damn good pass rusher, but you're also relying on, some replacement level linebackers and safeties, and, you're relying on the defensive tackles to really, step up, come this season. But yeah, it's tough. And, it's still tough because you knew this was coming. But it's like, now that it's happened, you're like, oh man, okay. I guess, Edmunds was pretty obvious, but the one to me was DJ Moore. And I get like, yeah, the writing was on the wall, but I thought maybe there was a way you could restructure the contract and maybe you could keep him. But yeah, that one was a little tough today. But the good news is, like, they got a second round pick for him, essentially. It was a pick swap, which kind of helps lighten it a little bit.
I was genuinely shocked that they were able to get a second, and yeah, they had to give up a fifth to get that bump. But at the same time, I think the initial report was it was going to be a mid-round pick. So initially, everyone was thinking, fourth, maybe a third if we're lucky.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it's, hey, second round pick for a receiver who's going to be turning 29. In June, and is coming off of his statistically worst season in the NFL, albeit very good in terms of stats. I mean, he's one of 5 players with over 50 catches on throws of 20-plus air yards, joining CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, and George Pickens. That's pretty strong company, and that is something that the Bills have sorely missed. I just think the Bills overpaid. That was,
well, they took on his
not
contract,
something anybody expected. Right.
Yeah, taking on the contract makes it worse. And I get it from like the Bill side. you got to get Josh Allen a weapon, right? Enough of throwing to, Khalil Shakir is a good 3. You know what I mean? He's a good 3 you can
He's
depend
not
on.
a 1.
He's not a 1.
Right.
Brandon Cooks at this stage of his career, like when anything he gave you essentially was a bonus. And like I talk about, remember what I said? You have to hit on draft picks. They did not hit on Keon Coleman, and look what happens. Now you have to send this and
No.
pay for,
Yeah.
Pay for DJ Moore. So yeah, it's I get it from Buffalo side. I just think, like you said, I think like they overpaid. And for the Bears, for Ryan Poles to get a second round pick, it was good. And I think like a couple things we have to kind of look at is, DJ Moore was owed a lot of money this year, and he had the worst year of his career in Ben Johnson's offense. That's not to say he's not a good player, because he's worked with a lot of, outside of Caleb Williams, he's worked with a lot of bad quarterbacks, and he put up a career year with Justin Fields. And I think that's kind of saying a lot. Now, he could work out to be a 1,000-yard receiver under Josh Allen, but for the Bears, drafting Luther Burden, drafting Colston Loveland, Rome Odunze they're banking on big time. You got guys that you're counting on and you're trusting. So unfortunately, it made DJ Moore a little expendable to kind of go ahead and make this move.
Yeah, absolutely. And, DJ Moore moving to work under Joe Brady again, who he knew in Carolina, averaged 80 yards a game and over 18 yards a catch with Joe Brady in his first season in Carolina. So, obviously a lot there in terms of the history between them. And, it definitely, plays into the factor of, Luther Burden, I think was kind of an unexpected pick there in that second round for the Bears. And the fact that he emerged as, like you said, as well as he did down the stretch, I think definitely softens the blow for this. And, we've talked about this wide receiver room being so deep in terms of weapons. And the question now becomes, is Jade Walker going to be the guy that is going to start getting elevated now that, we've seen flashes because of the injuries that the Bears have experienced this past season. If there's going to be another step in his progressions as a professional with the Bears, and who else they could potentially bring in, obviously, there's a lot of veteran names out there. Darnell Mooney's out there again, for all we know. That could be a reunion that is in the cards to help stretch the field and be a guy that gives a little bit of a different factor to that offense. I just don't think it's going to be Zacchaeus that comes back. I think everybody's kind of had enough of him. But it's going to be interesting. I thought about this. I sat here, I'm like, you know what? I get that you feel confident about 3 big weapons in Rome Odunze, Luther Burden, and Colston Loveland, and as a youth movement, the Bears are now 30th in cap space at the wide receiver position. There's no money in that room because of the rookie deals. That do they finagle some dollars or maybe find a veteran that's willing to come in and be a voice, because that's the thing that I think the Bears are going to miss the most about DJ is that veteran presence and what he was able to do working through injuries. Tough as nails. I mean, I think that's as much as you can say about the guy, and what, especially this last year, he was able to do, even if not putting up major stats like he did, like you said, in that last year with Justin Fields. It's a tough thing to try and fill, and who's going to be that guy to step up in that room is going to be the big question that I'm not really sure the answer to at this point in time. I'd assume it would be Rome, but we'll see.
Yeah, and anything that anyone's ever heard of, like, DJ being a bad teammate or being a locker room cancer, is just not true at all. Like, it's far from it. He was an easy guy to talk to. He was always available, except, after that last game. And I think he kind of, knew maybe it was the end. He really didn't want to have that goodbye moment just yet. We did mention, he did have the injury to the head. That was looked at before that play happened. So that very well could have been it. But yeah, they'll have to hit the free agent market for someone. It's going to be Rome. It's going to be Luther. Johnny Walker will probably take a step up here and have a bigger role, but you still need, I think, 2 wide receivers, whether you bring back Zacchaeus or Duvernay or you trade. Like here, Tim Patrick or Khalif Raymond are probably candidates due to the ties to Ben Johnson. You'll get someone on a veteran deal. They're not going to break the bank at wide receiver. It's just a position they can't afford to do that right now. The other thing, and this is from Aaron Lemming, who tweeted out, like, according to Over the Cap, the Bears still have around 69 million in simple restructures and 129 million in max restructures. So there is some wiggle room. Now, Grady Jarrett and Dio are contracts you probably don't want to do that to.
No.
Joe Tooney is probably one you want to, I'd say. Jonah Jackson, the candidate. I think those make sense. You don't want to touch Dio. You don't want to touch Grady because both have easier outs after the 2026 season. I think those are just two. You bite the bullet. You hope you draft Grady's replacement. You hope you find a pass rusher, whether it be Max Crosby or someone else in free agency, whatever the route is. And they're easier to move on from. But they can free up some money. And if let's just say they take on Max Crosby. He's get 35 million. They're interested, or they're not, I'm sorry. They are able to restructure a little bit of that, but it gets a little tricky too, because you have to kind of move it with guaranteed money and all that stuff. Now, do I advise them to do that? I think if you do it, you probably do 1 to 2 moves, right? Like it probably makes sense 1 to 2 to kind of move around. Maybe Montez Sweat. I don't know. Let me ask you this before we get kind of too far off topic. I think a lot of people think that they're going to move on from Montez Sweat after next season. I don't know, man. He's a cheaper option after 2026, right? Like his contract is more affordable after this season. And I mean, barring, he has a 1 sack year, like, let me look what it is.
So he is going to be in 2027. It drops. It's not a ton. His cap hit is still going to be 25 million in 2027. His base is lower.
Drops,
so
right?
there's some bonuses, but the other thing here is I get that aspect of it because they can save $21 million by releasing him next offseason. That's some significant money.
But you can restructure it because the dead cap is low.
Right. And yes, I wonder though, because 2 years left. So next year is the last year of the deal.
Yeah.
He's going to be 30. Yeah, 30. So September 4th, he turns 30. I'm on the fence about it. There's just something about it. I know he needs that other guy on the opposite end to really unlock what he is able to do. That's what he was in Washington. That's what they had going out there, and there was just a very good defensive line. Really across the entire way.
Yeah.
That's going to be a tough one. That's going to be a real tough one. Maybe with an extension, if you add another 2 years and you work something out that drops that number down. Okay. Like I think that would be doable. You let him play through the rest of his career here to 33, 34 years old and call it a day. I think that works.
Yeah. I mean, and again, it depends, because if you go out and get Max Crosby, let's say, you could probably move on from Montez Sweat, right? Like, if you don't, and you still have a big need of pass rush again next offseason, I mean, you're just creating
something went wrong.
Yeah, and you're creating another need for if you let go of Montez Sweat. So it's tough. The Bears are in a tough spot. They essentially have to find, I think Adam Johns tweeted, they have a center that they need. They need safety. They need a linebacker. They need left tackle. They need a pass rush. So I do think, I think the Bears are going to create a little more cap space before it's all said and done. Now, Can they create enough where they could get Max Crosby in a center and, maybe a left tackle? I don't know. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see what Ryan Poles does here, because he's kind of got a little bit of a puzzle to kind of to figure out here.
Yeah, and a lot of people are wanting Lindenbaum from Baltimore.
It's going to be 20
That's
million.
a
I mean, he's
lot
going to
that's a
be.
lot of money in a center. It really is, and I struggle to see the Bears dumping that much more money into the offensive line, especially when you're gonna have to start talking about a Darnell Wright extension at some point here very, very soon, and you're probably 2 years away from talking about a Caleb Williams extension as well, so that's a lot. Yeah, there's guys you can probably find in the second round of the draft that can fit that. I'm really not sure. Like this, the more I think about it, it's like, well, it could go that way, but then you're not going to have A, B, and C, or you could go this way and not have D, E, and F. It, I have a feeling there is going to be, and we've talked about this throughout Ryan Poles' tenure as the Bears GM. Every season, there seems to be one positional group that just gets flat out ignored. And it is a very obvious pain point once the games start getting played. Edge rusher, obviously, a one that was easily picked upon even with the Dio contract. I have a feeling that you're going to see something, probably safety or linebacker will probably be the position this year, where you're just like, what the hell, man? Like, why didn't you do anything? Because they're going to be so strapped unless, like you said, they go nuclear and just begin restructuring everything. Where you look at Montez Sweat, Cole Kmet, Jalen Johnson, Kyler Gordon, and every other major contract that you have on the books, and just kick the can down the road and eventually pay the piper in 3-4 years from now.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, Linderbaum. If you don't get Max Crosby, you go hard for Linderbaum. I think that's probably the best option. But like, it's going to be a lot of money.
Yeah.
You need to find a center that can do what Drew Dahlman did, and not only play well and play every game, but help control the line and the checks and the reads and help Caleb Williams. So McGovern, the former Bills center, is out there. Biodesh is out there. They got some guys. Would it be great if they landed Max Crosby and Linderbaum? That would be awesome. I think you fixed two needs right there, but it's going to be hard to do. So, excuse me. We do have some people talk about DeMarco Jackson. Yeah, I agree. We're not saying that DeMarco Jackson's a bad option. You still need more, though.
Yeah.
I think I fully expect DeMarco Jackson to be back. Probably back on a cheaper deal, an affordable deal for the Bears. You need more, though. Like, you're going to need another linebacker, probably two. Kevin Byard, I think, will be back, although it kind of feels like the longer this drags on, like, you won't hear much, but you're going to lose Jaquan Brisker. That's very likely going to happen, and you still have to find two more safeties. So, good news is it's a deep draft for what the Bears' biggest needs are. And you look at it: safety, linebacker, defensive tackle, center. It's a really good draft for those four. And it's a deep draft for depth. You talk to Daniel Jeremiah, you talk to any of these draft analysts, and they'll all say there's a sweet spot. You can find a lot of these guys in the second, third round. You'll find starter talent in the second, third round, which is fantastic. That is, exactly what the Bears need in this draft. Now you have two second rounders, and you're picking within 4 spots. So, you could go defensive tackle, safety, center. You could go safety, defensive tackle, center in those first 3 picks, and hopefully find those needs.
Yep, it's opening up paths. That much is for sure. And we heard from Ryan Poles that they've got that draft, the mock draft simulator, so he's used to working things around and trying different scenarios, seeing what falls. And we're a week away essentially from free agency now, and wondering what we're going to see that they might not necessarily have to focus on come the end of April in the NFL draft. It's going to be a very long road, but I think it's more right now just kind of a buckle up. I think the Bears are far from done, and it's just a matter of figuring out what the next step is. But today was a major leap forward in terms of both the release and the trade, and getting that cap space situated into a point where you feel a lot better about it, with more opportunities that can happen any minute. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. And free agency is essentially Monday is going to get rolling underway. You'll see deals right away. It's the worst kept secret of the open period. It's they've been talking since the combine. It's a stupid process, but they've been talking since the combine. So we'll do our free agency show Sunday to get you all caught up, and then if anything big breaks, we'll try to go that night or whenever we can. But yeah, it's you have to find a way to sustain success, and sometimes you have to make moves that are tough to make, but this is the position the Bears find themselves in.
Yep, and thankfully Ryan Poles, whether or not you appreciate the move, able to make them and get it done. He's not been afraid to jettison players, and he showed that again today. With what he has done to continue to shape this roster with an eye towards the 2026 season. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Bear Report podcast. Like Zack said, we will be back on Sunday night previewing NFL free agency and all of the potential players the Bears could end up signing as soon as Monday, reportedly, in air quotes, depending on how you look at that NFL picture and how everything goes. So we'll be back then, and with breaking news as it occurs. For all we know, it's going to be a long 72 hours. That much we do know. So until then, enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see you next time right here on the Bear Report.
Good, better, bad! Good, better, bad! Never let it run! Never let it run! Good gets better! Anybody gets better! Anybody gets better! Anybody gets better! Bears on 3, 1, 2, 3! Bears!